Hello, hello, everyone. It is Friday. It's our day with Thorne, Waya Davis. And in this show, we talk about just different topics, what's going on in the transits or just different topics. Sometimes deaf astrology, sometimes just different stuff. So today, Thorne will be leading us through some topics. So I'm curious to see what Thorne has brought for us. Yes. Okay. So, I was thinking that, oh, hold on one moment. I just have to put down the captions so I can see to turn on the captions. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. Happy Friday. So anyway, I want to talk with Andy about some topics starting with today. So I was thinking, why not? We could start Monday soon on April 7th. Uh, this Monday, what's going to be happening is that Mercury is going retrograde and it will actually change directions and go direct. It will station. So, what is that? We should talk about what that means. And I think we can share a little bit and Andy can add things if she wants and to that discussion. Sounds good. Okay. So, first of all, what does it mean when a planet that's retrograde stops and goes direct? Um, it stations, when a planet is retrograde, it means that all the R words are coming up like review, reanalyze, re-express, or all those recycle words for the internal work, are going on. And then when the planet starts to go station direct, it means that it starts to finish that retrograde part and the energy will shift to moving forward because this direct station is like a pause in the action. It's pause between the retrograde and when the forward motion goes, and that pause is a station. It's where we breathe and we relax and calm down and we everything kind of interacts within us and we plan for everything going forward. So April 7th, which is Monday, and then the 8th and 9th, by Wednesday, that pause period, we'll feel that kind of calming down. And then April 8th and 9th, we'll start to feel that energy kind of move forward with the Mercury, with communication and technology and transportation and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think anything you want to add, Andy? So I would add that the Mercury in retrograde is in Pisces, which is some people would say it's not a strong place for Mercury because Mercury is at home in Virgo, so it's opposite that. So you call it like in fall or detriment or whatever. So we'd say that Mercury is kind of I would prefer to say how is it strong in Pisces, not that it's weak, but how is it strong? What's it strong with in Pisces? And I would say it's strong with making kind of pictures and visions and, thinking of how the world could be, what the vibe could be, envisioning a new world or something, anything, So I think we can grab hold of that station and say because Mercury's going to stop there for a long time, we can grab hold of that Mercury energy in Pisces and say, like, I'm going to do some visioning or write in my journal about what my vision is for the future. You want to look at the house in your chart where Pisces is and say, Mercury stopped in that house, so if it's in your, house of career, maybe you're focusing on visioning your career. It's funny, like Mercury stopped in my 10th house and today I just made a brochure of all the services for the Moira Press and it's just interesting. That is one form of visioning because you're like putting everything in one vision place and it's a career thing. So I think that's a good example of how you can kind of capitalize on that Mercury energy and do a long-term kind of thinking project on something. So look at the house of Pisces for you and where can you use that thinking ability to kind of vision something in that area of life. Just adding with that, for example, my Pisces is house is the eighth house, so that it's strong intuition, strongly connected with the other, and how do I interact and react with others, and how do I connect with their intuition, and going back and forth. That it's very magical house for sure, the eighth house, and it's related to the occult and ancestors and all these things that that could be kind of for eighth. Yeah, yeah. If you're a Pisces rising person, then you would be very Pisces in general, and we would say that you're now communicating about your way of seeing the world and who you are and what you're sensing and feeling and everything. Do you think people are more psychic with Mercury and Pisces? I would say there's a flavor of communication that maybe has more of an empathy or more of a compassion influence with how they communicate. Maybe there is nonviolent communication or so, NVC. So, and that could influence your communication. So maybe it's more um soft-hearted but still strong, with the expression of their energy, feeling with communication. Yeah. Yeah, you can think of with Mercury in Pisces that the maybe the throat chakra is connected to the whole aura, so we're wanting to talk about like all of it, like everything we feel, see, um yeah, so it's going to be so different than when Mercury is back in Aries, which is such a different vibe. I mean, that's like a more like fiery communication, like blah, 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 like just like a lot of talking, like direct, direct, direct. Whereas Mercury and Pisces is more like floating and kind of ethereal. And so I think we're going to see how long is it in Pisces? Let me check my ephemeris. Got my small ephemeris here. Okay, let me check here. Okay, so Mercury will be in Pisces until April 17th. So that's when it will transition into Aries. So yeah, and then they'll stay in Aries for, let me see how long. We'll stay in Aries until May 11th. So that's when it transitions into Taurus. So yeah, so interesting. So it's really a long time. We have 2 weeks this month where we can like use that Pisces Mercury energy. So, I think for people who are into visioning or manifesting, it's a great time to vision. You know what? Do you know what it means, gestural drawing? Like So linear drawing is very Virgo, where you're like drawing something exactly with the lines, but gestural drawing is like where you're like, and you like make something really quick. Like it's not, you're not trying for a perfect picture, you're trying for like a gesture of that picture. And that's very Mercury and Pisces. So it's like we could, like, if you have a vision, they say that if you draw a picture of it, it's more likely to happen. Or like a vision board. That'd be a great time to do a vision board. Yeah. So it's nice we have 2 weeks with that. You don't often get that much time with that. Yeah, it's like a art collage kind of thing. Yeah, that's cool. Yes, that. So yeah, I'll keep that in mind. So awesome. Okay, so when Mercury goes into Aries, it's going to be a different vibe, because Aries is fire and Pisces is water. So it's very soft and very flowing in Pisces. And then when it goes Mercury in Aries, it's like you said, it's very direct. It's quick and direct. And also, I would imagine that Aries Mercury is very brief, like to the point, like blurts things out, like, this, then this, and this. And it's like kind of not really long-winded, whereas the Pisces Mercury is very much like this, then it's very all over the place, so kind of meandering around. And so it's very clear with like blurting points out, with Aries Mercury. So yeah. Yeah, I think Aries Mercury would be a better time to like have an argument or a debate. So if in your vision time you come up with some conversations you want to have where there's really like a discussion involved, you might want to wait until Mercury goes into Aries and then you can really, have a deep, like fiery discussion more than Mercury and Pisces wants to just kind of, think and, it's really Mercury and Pisces wants to just chill, yeah. So Mercury in Aries is like quick, and yeah, it's quick. Yeah. So what do you think it means that the sun's in Aries right now? How does that affect the Mercury in Pisces? Well, it feels like the sun in Aries is affecting the Mercury in Pisces maybe by pushing it a little bit of where maybe if there's a passive passivity to it, then you kind of have to open up and do more analysis of communication and be brave to open up and say, okay, this is really how I feel. I have to be willing to open up and admit how I feel. I can't just hold it inside. Yeah, it's more impulsive nature to it just adds a kinetic nature to humans in the body. With Sun in Aries, it's like it's a red sign. So it's like red gets into the eyes of people, and they're like a little bit more excited. So I think there's an excited energy to the human people right now, but the way they're thinking is like kind of like, whoa, so when Mercury gets into Aries, will the sun have left Aries by that time? It'll still be there. Let me check. No, the sun will still be in Aries, when Mercury gets into Aries. So the sun will transition into Taurus on the 20th, so on April 20th. So, you know, there's a 3 or 4 little days in there where the sun and will be in Aries and Mercury will also transition in, they'll be or the sun will go before the sun goes in Taurus. So it's a good time to really catch that window when they overlap. Um, yeah, because maybe in that 4 days when the sun and Mercury are in Aries, you could plan a debate or a really deep discussion where you're like fired up about something. Because that's that little window with the sun and Mercury in Aries. So that'll be nice. Yeah. Maybe not only a debate, but maybe also an idea, a planning meeting, like if there's a show or an event or you're starting to plan a discussion with ideas, a brainstorm, things like that. That'd be an example of a time where you can take advantage of that window. Yeah, nice. That's true. All right. All right. I think we're good with that part. Okay. And so now I want to transition over to the topic of the pileup with the planets in Pisces. Because we have several planets, in Pisces for a while. There's a lot of Pisces energy floating around right now. So, do you want to kick that off? Yeah, I want to show, let's see, there's a picture. Here's April 2025. You can kind of see there's Saturn, Venus, Mercury. So there's Saturn, Venus, Mercury, plus the North Node, right? Right. So that North Node. And then they're all kind of traveling to that Saturn at zero Aries. So it's like this, the end of Pisces is really, there's just this big pile up. So Mercury is, communication. And then Venus would bring a kind of sweet, artistic, creative, connective feel to that communication. So we get this like connection, wanting to connect and like, be arty or whatever. But then Saturn being there makes it more strict and structured, like today when I was designing my brochure, it's like I was doing arty communication, but it was making this object, and that's very Saturn is like manifesting a thing, or structuring what you're thinking, like thinking about a structure or thinking about an art project, or how to set something up, how to concretize something, so you'd think it would be like a flowing, chatty time with Mercury and Venus, but because Saturn's there, it's kind of strict and real. It's like we're discussing something, but we're discussing making something real. And I think with Pisces, we're looking at really making the vibe right. Making the feel right, the tone right, the smell, flavor, vibes, everything. So, like if you're working at the shop or something, maybe you're discussing how can we make the vibe right here and like make the structure and everything, correct or, so I think, making sure that you restructure things right now to get a good feeling for everyone there. The whole group feels good again. If you've been having any struggles, it's a good time to reorganize to really find the good vibe again. So, what do you think? My feeling with Venus and Saturn um is where Saturn wants to make a tangible t container to make it strong. And Venus brings in that kind of soft, comfortable, beautiful, how it can feel beautiful, but, be productive and useful with that container, you know. So that's why it is for me, it's with Pisces, it's like that soft and solid kind of thing. It's sweet and like soft and flowing. But when it's changing, to Aries, it'll be a whole different vibe. Yeah. Because like just recently, Neptune transitioned into Aries. So that will add a flavor to all of the other planets to move into that Aries because it still have that Pisces Aries kind of mix back and forth and kind of thing. So until all of them move into Aries. Yeah. Let me look for my list. Hold on. I have a Saturn in Pisces list. So I thought maybe I could read some of these of just what we are analyzing with Saturn and Pisces as a group. I said like structuring the global community, noticing when the vibes are not perfect, taking care of everyone's emotional needs at the same time, working on being perfect in spiritual ways, um, setting spiritual goals, finding spiritual structure, getting spiritually or emotionally unstuck. So I think, a lot of this, like at the Moira Press, we're working on like the Course in Miracles and, looking at how to pray, how to make magic. We're reading a book called Real Magic. That's very Saturn Pisces. It's like what's real magic, not fake magic, but like real magic is like, thinking, visioning, getting your heart right, so that you can, like the Bible would say, like I've been reading that mustard seed parable about growing, little things into big things, but they talk about the soil of your heart. Like if your heart soil is good and clean and healthy, then things will grow from you. But if it's like your heart's not right, then it's hard to grow things from you. So I think it's concepts like that we're working on now. It's like these bigger concepts of how to live, how to be magical, how to, grow forth, whatever, like spiritual perfection. Also, I want to add with that yesterday, I was watching YouTube, some video where one of my fellow friends and peers, also a magic teacher named Theo, uh, get apartma, they go by Theo, but their other guest speaker on that show is named Tony, and the two of them were talking about these different various topics. But one part was Tony's new book that recently was published, and the topic was slow magic. So, slow magic was what the book was called. And so we were talking about how, in theory, how magic can start in a slow way but it can expand over time, and then also it can go deeper over time. And so there's this expansion and depth and how long it goes on. So that made me think of Saturn and Pisces, of where that expansive, it's like expanding, or there's like Saturn, but it's like stretching longer, with that slowness. It's giving an opportunity to grow in depth, with that spiritual feeling. So that was cool. So I really thought that it showed up with that. Yeah, slow magic is so Saturn and Pisces. That's funny, actually, because it's like they say, like, yeah, I'm planning to get that book. Yeah, yeah, that's cool. What was Tony's last name? I have to look for it. I have to find it, and I'll let you know. Okay. Okay. So let me see, some things on this list are mood enhancers. So things to support the mood in Saturn and Pisces times. So incense, um, or like virtuous smells or like spiritual smells. You could get one of those like metal, like incense things where you're just like, like just like incense everywhere. Um, music. Colors, like using colors, wearing colors, color theory, branding, anything where you're making the mood or the tone right on your website, on a book cover, on your wardrobe, on, like anything. Um, sounds, so like, spiritual sounds like bing, or to toning like bong wong wong, like yeah, like oming or something like that. Chimes, I mean, that's another like very spiritual sound. Um, crystal grids, where they do like, yeah, that would be a very spiritual structure, right? Of just like building this grid with, crystals to make happen something that you are manifesting. That's very Saturn and Pisces. I think divinity in general or church, church is a very structured place for spiritual development, really. I mean, some people poo-poo church, but it's a good structure sometimes. Okay. Also, I would add if it's not church, then, rituals or some kind of spiritual practice, um, you know, uh, some kind of routine, with that, ritual practice. Yeah, you could make your own spiritual structure. I was thinking about building an altar, right? That would be a spiritual structure. Yeah. Yeah, an altar. Yeah, I love altars. Um, so you could do like more nature things. If you're like a Sag person, you could do like bird feeder, something that's like a nature-based spiritual thing. Or no, prayer in general, how you structure a prayer. Um, at my house, it's funny, I got this prayer book from Goodwill, and we have been like every dinner we light a candle and then we randomly pick numbers of like a page number and then like read a prayer. And it's funny because it's like a random content generator. It's just like what's the prayer gonna be? But it's just kind of funny just be like whoa, 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 like all these different prayers. But it's kind of a cool structure or ritual to include prayer in everyday life. And then the last one is intercession. Do you know what that means? Intercession? Yes. Um, that's from my religious background growing up. Intercession is like, or interfering. It's like a person that will pray for another person. So it's like a mediator that will pray or, facilitate something for another person. So, for example, Jesus was an intercessor for us humans with God and things like that. So that kind of idea. Interesting. But anyway, going back to this is since, just letting go of the church thing, I would say that intercession, you can apply to any kind of in between kind of negotiation, from me to this and how can this impact or connect with the other. So it's like bringing spiritual life into your relationships with other people. Makes me think of this book, Behaving as If the God in All Life Mattered. It's by this woman who grew these gardens called the Findhorn Gardens, and I'm familiar with those. Yeah, she would pray, talk to the devas or spirits of the plants and pray to them and talk with them. And she grew this garden that was like out of season. It was like crazy cool. But in that book, Behaving as If the God in All Life Mattered, she talks about if you have a problem with a person, you can send your spirit guide up to go talk with their spirit guide and they can work out that problem. And so like maybe that's kind of an idea of like more spiritual like intercession is like we're hold on. My coworker is leaving. Hold on a sec. Get some coffee and some smells. These are made by Debbie. Okay. Sorry. I was putting on some smells. Okay, yes. Yeah, the Finhorn Gardens, that is a garden with the devas of the plants and the spirits and the spirit guides and resolving issues. Yeah, yeah, I do agree with that concept. That works, yeah. So how do you think spirit guides are involved with Saturn in Pisces and how we can talk with our spirit guides while all these planets are piled up in Pisces? I do feel that there are different. various different ways we can do that. It depends on, each of our spiritual journey and spiritual path of where that belief or that connection, for example, maybe people who are planning to, um, they go to synagogues more often, and all these things, they pray in a certain way than people who have, um, Buddhist people, so they practice in a certain way and they go to their place for meditation or to be connected with giving or offering their divinity and prayers and all that kind of stuff and help and whatever's happening at that time. So there's just a variety of places. So there's an opportunity to grasp that practice more now because you can become more rooted in it for sure. Yeah. I like that idea, like grasp whatever spiritual practice you have and then make a structure of it. Um, if it's building an altar or setting up ritual times or, setting up a group to discuss it or like, depends on the house of your Pisces too. So like analyze that house where Pisces is for you because it's very important that that house in your chart right now is like popping. So yeah, for sure. Because when your house is lit up like that, it's just the perfect time to really work with it and go forward. Yeah, yeah. So what do you think of the North Node being involved? Well, since the North Node is connected with this lifetime and this path and service, and showing up with the world and everything, is like who we are in that role, how you want to express that, the soul journey, basically, the North Node kind of speaks to that. So the North Node in Pisces would be my perspective with that is that people might now be more aware of feeling that pull, or how do I want to serve, or how do I want to show up with the community here? How do I want to give back? How do I want to perform more? The community support, all of these things. So it's more of a pull to do something, but maybe you don't know, you know, that you don't know several of these things, but it's a good time to research that right now. Yeah, I would add to that it's like if we go towards Pisces things right now, we're developing from a karmic perspective. It's like even if it doesn't feel natural to build an altar, if you do it right now, you're kind of developing and going towards your soul's journey because it's the North Node. So it's like it's a karmic evolution point. It's like evolve to more spiritual life, evolve to a more spiritual journey. Like if you have heavy Virgo planets, now's the time to go opposite of that and go towards the Pisces element. If you're a heavy Pisces person, then go ahead and develop and, use those skills right now and just really be kind of, growing, be prolific in that growth. Right, because right now the North Node in Pisces means that the South Node is Virgo, and so that is, axis will continue for a good, 2 years or so. Go back and forth. So I think a lot of practice is going to happen in there for those 2 years. So with how the South Node wants to release and wants to let go. And that means that Virgo is Earth. It's very, very detailed and it wants that perfection. It wants that structure. So what that means is we're trying to let go of control, maybe control of the environment, let go of control of people and structures and all these things and change that framework and all of those things. And then the Pisces North Node is more expansion of the full awareness. and knowledge and the application of that. So hold on one second. Um, I have Jan Spiller's Astrology for the Soul. This is a book on the North Node. Let's look at North Node and Pisces. Okay. So she's saying things to develop while the North Node is in Pisces are being non-judgmental, com compassion, surrendering anxiety to a higher power. So I think that like giving it up to God thing or your higher power or spirit or universe or oneness or whatever, like give up the anxiety to the universe is like one of the lessons now, for sure. Um, freeing the mind through meditation and self-reflection. So meditating, you know, um, to let that mind go and just be more, one. We're studying, it's interesting, we're studying Enlightenment for Lazy People. That's the book we're studying right now. And I feel like studying enlightenment is very Pisces. It's like finding the light inside, like enlightenment. And it's like that's very and we're studying like oneness, like all of us are one. That's very Pisces, for sure. That reminds me also related to the idea of when the Renaissance Reformation happened a long time ago, where a lot of religions or spiritual philosophers were discussing new concepts that were coming up, and it's like how to do art differently, how to approach the style and fashion differently. There's all these things. So at that time it was a big shift. So now, with that thought of, enlightenment and all of that is like how to approach it differently now. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. So the other things are focusing on a spiritual pathway. So focusing on your spiritual life, not like the details and the everyday life and it's like you're gonna go towards that spiritual life right now. Trusting in positive outcomes, so trusting the positive thinking, positive, um, acknowledging connection with the universe and welcoming change. For sure, for sure. It's interesting because with thinking positive, is because there is such a thing as called toxic positivity, right? So, of course, there's a binary of where, I'm thinking positive to toxic positivity. It was this binary of like, where am I on that spectrum? And how to make sure that it doesn't get out of balance. So, I find it interesting because humans are so funny in that way of where we will blow up with something and we'd be all positive and everything is good, but it can be a challenge, a blind spot of like where there's like toxic positivity and there's too much of that. So I'm curious about your thoughts about that. Well, my brother, who's a kind of consciousness worker, he's a yogi, and he's done like the same meditation like 750,000 times. He's like going for 1 million. He's like very like, you know, knows a lot about spiritual things. Um, but he taught me the concept of spiritual bypass, which is where you have a tough situation, maybe a tough personality or a toxic person or something, and you just like think positive, think positive, think positive, and you bypass the real life work of dealing with that situation. Like, so a real it's really healthy to attack the situation from a real life perspective and be like, I need boundaries here. This person's toxic, whatever. And then you go to the spiritual pathway and say, like, now think positive, forgive, all that stuff. But first you have to do the real world world work to face the issue. So we don't want to do spiritual bypass, where we don't deal with stuff. That's right. And not only spiritual bypassing, but also you can have, other kinds of bypassing, like emotional bypass or mental bypass. Where you want to disassociate and you don't want to face something. It's like, no, you have to face something and really live with that and then go forward. And when you're done with that, then you can go over and apply it with your internal life and really heal whatever. So I feel like there's that relationship between life and doing it and don't avoiding it. So, well, what do you think about being positive right now with Saturn in Pisces? Like, how does the Saturn, does that affect the ability to think positive or it's a challenge? Yeah, it's a challenge in some ways of Saturn wanting to have that container of this tangible container, but Pisces wants to flow. It wants to be fluid. So it's interesting. It's a challenge of thinking positive of how to have that permissible or like permeable, sorry. Like it's not like a strict container, but it's a more of a permeable container. It's like a relaxed container. So it's very interesting concept. Yeah, I think maybe it's a good time to build structures that allow for positive thinking for the long term. Saying like if we structure our classes this way at school, then everyone can feel good for the long term. And they can think positive long term. Like, it's not necessarily thinking positive for the now. It's thinking positive for building structures for the future too, right? Yeah, and only it's also applies to the context of how to, you know, be a resource to ourselves, not only a self resource, but a resourcing in the community and how to give and share mutual aid and how we can, work together for the long term. It doesn't, we don't have to depend on the system. It's how can we do it on our own, and how can we set up that ecosystem of, more, um, rooted because capitalism wants to divide us. It's like how can we not allow that to intervene with this, continuing long-term resourcefulness. So, that's one of the challenges right now that I see with Saturn and Pisces. Yeah. Interesting. I'm not a politics person. I like know nothing about politics, but do you have any comments about how this applies to the political realm? Well, from my becoming an activist view, um, right now with how the US government is right now, it's basically fucked up. And with everything going on and pardon my language, but I'm sorry not sorry. But basically it's fucked up. And so meaning that the community of who's disabled or who has different needs in that space, with that philosophy of no one left behind, how we can be a resource to ourselves or flip it out around and be a resource to each other. So, we can co-create that space and that container in mutual aid and help one another. And it's the same idea of like how the forest has its own ecosystem. And so there's the ground, and we have mushrooms, or you have small plants, or you have underground things in the roots of trees and everything. So those roots talk to each other, and the mushrooms and other plants on the ground talk to each other, and then the trees talk to each other. So it's similar concept of how can we build our ecosystem and who has a role with each. So that's a similar concept. So How can we offer this and how can we, you know, build with this? And so I think we can help going forward with that long term, with this fucked up shit that's happening. So, wow, you swore 3 times. Yeah. Well, that means it's serious and I feel it. Well, you didn't do spiritual bypass on the government. I appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Because honestly, it is it is just like it's awful. Um, the worst of humanity, but at the same time we're trying to how to find the good mood in humanity and it's just a trip. It's a trip. It's a trip. It's a mind trip. Yeah. Okay, yeah, I have a student the other day was asking me about the politics, and it's just like I'm not a political astrologer. I mean, I'm like very individualized and looking at individual charts, and I just don't really focus on the politics layer, so it's not my strong suit. That's fine. It's funny because I don't know if I told you this, but in college I had a minor in political science. Oh, uh, my major was U.S. history. So the more I found out, I got the more I found out, the more jaded I got on politics with my minor. So I dropped my minor and I was like, yeah, no thanks. And my internship, I dropped everything and I was like, oh, and I focused on my major and I graduated with a degree from, with my major. And so I'm good with that. So it's like, yeah, politics, goodbye. And of course, I do have this curiosity with politics, but now it's more of where how can I be a good activist? How can I show up in a good way with that? Yeah. Nice. We had a good discussion about the planets. I think one strength of our show, and maybe we should work into the structure of our show, is discussing the current transits. Like we could discuss Saturn, Neptune, not today, but later we could discuss the Saturn Neptune conjunction. Yes, yes. Yeah, I would be down for that. Yeah, that'd be a good one. Because this month has a lot of transits happening. So yeah, I'm down for that transit discussion. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, what else? Do you have anything else for our last 8 minutes uh, let me think. Well, yes, I can add a few more thoughts because remember Monday we have on April 7th we have that Mercury station direct. So we have to understand that on the 7 days later, on April 14th, I believe, uh, that's when Venus goes station direct. So that's a whole different vibe because we've had Venus retrograde for I don't know, a few months. So it's stopping on April 14th. So like it's a pause to integrate everything that we've learned and uncover things through analysis that Venus, the retrograde has been happening. So Mercury retrograde stopping, and then this stopping meaning that we have that 7 day space of how to, it's like an odd overlap-ish kind of thing. So, and how do we include it there with Mercury and everything that we learned there? And then it's like, how can we integrate with everything with Venus? And we want to learn from the retrogrades. So, we can put those together and then really take a look of how do we synthesize with those together. So, I have an interesting process because sometimes we think about the planets being separate, but for this specific space, it's cool to see how they are synthesized together in that space, and we can learn from that. Yeah, so give it time to process for that. Okay, I have to look at this. Um, So I see. Okay, so it goes Mercury goes direct, then Venus direct. So Mercury is at 26 Pisces and Venus is at 24 Pisces. So they're like right there, right at there. Interesting, interesting. Uh, Plus, April 12th, I believe, if I remember right, is 12th, if not the 14th. I think it's the 12th. There's a full moon in Libra. So yeah, and I want to comment that Mars in Cancer is at 24 degrees too. So it's trine that Pisces element, you know. So Mars in Cancer, it's like you can be making crafting, making art projects for a good vibe, you know, making things. It's very makey right now. Cooking, doing house projects, you know, building an altar is very Mars and Cancer plus Pisces, like building something, you know, so I think, and then Uranus in Taurus is sextile, both of them. So it's like, it's just like that looks to like wardrobe and makeup and hair and earrings, you know, it's funny. I just hung up, well, Shane helped me, but like, I just hung up my that's cool. That's very cool. That's great. Yeah, Uranus and Taurus. Like I just hung up my necklace hanger and I have my earrings and like so and I'm working on wardrobing, you know, I'm reading a book about costume design. So I think we I remember that book, yeah. So I think, you know, people in general can be using this Pisces in a way to inform their wardrobe and their backgrounds on YouTube and, you know, like visual aesthetic elements of their business. You know, it's very tangible with the Taurus involved, I think. Yeah, plus Taurus is very tactile. So it's very sensory. Um so it's like it's not only it's the not only the face and fashion, but also about food and pleasure and things like that feel pleasurable. So yeah, maybe thinking about which book feels good to read, or you know, does that the cover feel good on the book? You know, do you want to read it, or you know, that what's written or the page or the fabric, does that feel good, or you know, other things like that. Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool. I think we're good. We're good to wrap up for. All right, thanks for leading us today. That was fun for me. Yeah, you're welcome. My pleasure. Okay, well, bye, Thorne. I love you. All right, I love you too, Andy. All right, I'll see you Tuesday. All right, bye. Love you.